What you've just heard are some of the many possible ways to use this new SYNTHFOX module called SLEDGEHAMMER. I'm Obrilis, and today I will be overviewing it. SLEDGEHAMMER is an experimental dynamics and harmonics processor. At its core, it has a vectoral gate similar to those found in low-pass gates. There are three signal inputs on SLEDGEHAMMER. Inputs 1 and 2 have dedicated simple volume control knobs, while the third input is passed to an additional stage, which I call the through-zero VCA, which is essentially a voltage control crossfader that fades between the inverted and uninverted copy of the input signal. The three inputs are then mixed down and passed through the vectoral core, the initial level of which is set with this white knob. The LED indicates the sum of the initial level settings and the level CV inputs. There are two level CV inputs. LCV2 has a regular attenuator, while LCV1 has an attenuverter allowing to pass the inverted or uninverted copy of the control voltage. Additionally, there is a ping input which expects gates. Upon receiving a gate, this input strikes the vectoral core with a short, decay-only envelope. The dull and vivid switch on the right selects between the two response characteristics of the vectoral core of the module. At the bottom of the module, there are four simultaneous, differently processed outputs. The gate output is a direct buffered output of the module's vectoral core. Next is the fold output, which is a version of the gate output passed through multiple wavefolding stages. The third output is called band, and it outputs a result of processing the sound through an esoteric network of transistors. Finally, the sharp output is the result of comparing the band output to a threshold voltage set by the sharp sensitivity knob, summed up with a corresponding unattenuated control voltage input. Now that we went over the main control features, let's dive in and first listen to different output sweeps. For basic testing and output sweeps, I will use the Benjamin oscillator A triangle output because a triangle wave is a simple wave and Benjamin is a very widespread module. I patch the triangle A output to the input 3 of SLEDGEHAMMER. For now, we won't mind the VCA functionality of this input and treat this manual crossfade knob as just a regular volume knob. Now I will take the gate output and put it to the nearness mixer, which goes to my system's output. Let's sweep it. The gate output is the least harmonically enriched of the four outputs. It outputs a smooth, almost unaltered copy of the input triangle wave. Now let's add some modulation to the level by patching a self-cycling surge voltage control slope to LCV input 1. Let's now move on to the next output, which is the fold output. The fold output is the wave-folded version of the gate output. Another kind of wavefolding is available by simply flicking the dull-vivid switch to the other side. The wavefolder is also quite sensitive to the input volume. Changing the switch back to vivid for more bright open sounds. Now let's move on to the band output. Although it does a little bit of wavefolding, the processor behind the band output usually acts more like a wave shaper or even a distortion. Finally, let's listen to the sharp output. It has an additional control called sharp sensitivity, which is set with the blue knob and the SCV input below it. To hear anything from the sharp output, this level has to be set accordingly. Often the sharp output sounds sort of like PWM effect on some of the conventional VCOs. Behind the sharp output is a comparator, which outputs a sharp square wave that goes almost rail to rail in amplitude. If you intend on using it as audio source, then be sure to attenuate it before putting it to the system output. Although Sledgehammer sounds nice on its own, it sounds even better when played in a feedback loop. I'm going to demonstrate it on the same triangle wave as we used in the sweeps demonstration. Except unlike in the sweeps demo, I'm going to patch it into the first input this time. This will leave the third input unpatched, and then the sharp output, which is internally normaled into it, will get automatically routed into that input. Additionally to this, the fold output is normaled to input 2. This creates a multi-path, dynamically controllable feedback loop. Let's listen to the gate output and play around with the normaled default feedback loop. The dull and vivid switch provides more tonal possibilities. And let's not forget that the through zero VCA behind the third input has a dedicated control voltage input. So we can use a modulation source, like this surge VCS cycling upon itself, to control the kind of the feedback. Here I set up the surge smooth generator as an LFO and used it to control the level by patching it into the LCV1. Let's change up the previous patch a little. Instead of listening to the gate output, this time we will listen to the fold output. The feedback loop with the sharp output being normal to the third input allows us to get even more different tonal variations of the folding. We can even get to somewhat resonant territories. The true modular power of Sledgehammer is unleashed when the feedback loop contains other separate modules. For this example, I will be listening to the bend output of the Sledgehammer. The fold output I will patch into the SYNTHFOX Passive Tools 1 high-pass filter. The output of the filter goes to input number 3. This will override the sharp output normaled into it with the filter output. Let's see what happens if we set the response to vivid. Let's use the VCS to control the amount of feedback from the Passive Tools 1 high-pass filter. A voltage-controlled feedback path often opens up a lot of new interesting, sometimes unexpected effects. Another major feature of the Sledgehammer is the ping input. It's located between the two-level CV inputs. It expects a gate, but the circuitry behind it is almost entirely passive and very simple, so you can try your luck with any sort of signals. I set up a very simple demo patch. An FM tone from the Benjamin goes into the first input of the Sledgehammer. The fold output goes to the mixer. The VCS in self-cycle mode outputs a consistently repeating gate on its end out. I'm going to patch it into the ping input on the Sledgehammer. Here I made the previous patch a bit more complex by creating a random voltage generator out of the surge SSG and putting the stepped random voltage output of the stepped side directly into the ping input of the Sledgehammer. As I mentioned earlier, this input doesn't necessarily wait for gates. It responds to the staircase-like voltage in a very interesting way. It starts skipping some of the beats, and the remaining strikes end up having different velocities. Now that we've seen how the Sledgehammer deals with simpler tones, let's check out what can it do with more complex sounds. In this example, I will be using a Game Boy running LSDJ on it. I programmed a simple electro-style beat in LSDJ and put the Game Boy's output through a preamp module to raise it to modular levels. First, let's hear how it sounds on its own. Here I built a feedback loop around the external high-pass filter like in the last example from the feedback loop demos. I will use the envelope follower of the preamp module to modulate the feedback level. This way, this modulation will be in sync with the beat. This wraps up the demonstration and the overview of the basic controls and features of the new SYNTHFOX module Sledgehammer. As with most of my gear, this module is a creative tool that calls for exploration and experimentation past its direct intended usage. Sledgehammer is DC coupled, so it can be a CV processor as well. It can self-oscillate, so it can be a wacky VCO. Combine that with the ping input and a negative LCV offset to get a kick drum. Have fun and use it your way! I hope you enjoyed the Sledgehammer overview as much as I enjoyed developing this module. I've been Aubrey Liss, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.